Welcome to the monthly HMIS training webinar. This month we'll be learning about our ad holding tool Looker. This will be a basic overview of Looker, so if you've been using Looker previously, this will be a refresher course. In today's training, we'll cover exactly what Looker is, how to think like Looker in order to get the most out of its capabilities, when it's best to use Looker versus a canned report, Looker's interface, meaning the dashboard you'll see when you open Looker, Looker's models, which determine what kind of data you can explore, and how to export the looks you create. If you have any questions along the way about general Looker functionality or the topics we're discussing, please enter them in the chat box. My colleagues will be available to answer your questions. If you have any questions about a specific report you've created in Looker or something else related to your agency, please submit a ticket to the HMIS help desk and we will be able to assist you. Now we'll get started on discussing exactly what Looker is. I wanted to clarify some terms before we get started with the presentation. Looker, Explore tab, and Data Analysis tab, and Data Analysis tool. Looker is the name of the company that created and manages the tool we'll be working with today. You'll see the Explore tab or Data Analysis tab in many of 211 OC's HMIS materials, such as the knowledge base articles. The Explore tab is used to create reports using Looker, and the Data Analysis tab is used to access saved reports that were created using Looker, either by you or by the OC HMIS staff. Finally, you'll see the data analysis tool in materials created by BitFocus, the vendor of our HMIS. However you refer to it, Looker is a tool for explaining HMIS data. Each piece of data you put into HMIS, such as universal data elements like the client's date of birth, gender, race, or project-specific data elements such as disability information and income information, can be explored in Looker to gain, sorry, one moment, because I'm getting, okay, I apologize for that. So let's see, let me back up. So project-specific data elements such as disability information and income information can be explored in Looker to gain insight into clients you've been serving and services that you've been providing. Exploring can be thought of as a process of creating reports, and explaining can be thought of as the process of using reports to influence decision-making. To get the most out of Looker, you need to understand how it works and what its limitations are. Like any reporting tool, you can only get out what you put into Looker. It has no way of using information that exists outside of HMIS, so it's important to understand what you've put into HMIS before you start trying to extract knowledge from Looker. Here we're covering a very simplified look at data analysis process. It begins with raw data that's unprocessed, generally in a table format with columns and rows. After the initial analysis, you're left with information that can be seen in the data. Finally, after reviewing the information from your analysis, you're left with insight, which puts the information into practice. For more information on this framework, you can check out the article linked in this slide, which will be included in the wrap-up email you'll receive after this webinar. Let's look at an example of the data analysis process, which starts with data. Here we have a completely made up data set showing us 13 client identifiers. the client's project start dates, and whether or not the client receives SNAP benefits. This data was pulled from Looker after a case manager noticed towards the end of the month she tends to frequently work with clients on food assistance. Since some of these benefits dispersed between the 1st and 10th of each month, there may be a pattern to her observation that we can see in the HMIS data. And the case manager thought it would be a good idea to start focusing on connecting clients with CalFresh. Looking at the table in its raw unprocessed form, you're probably not getting much out of it. This is the data part of data analysis. No analysis has been done yet. Upon creating a simple pivot table, which is functionally also available in Looker, but we'll get to that later, you can see that a majority of the clients enrolled during the month of July already have CalFresh. And those with CalFresh enrolled in the project on or after the 15th. This is interesting, but it's still just information. Insight represents the conclusion of the analysis process. Case manager thought she noticed an uptick in food assistance towards the end of the month and thought perhaps the agency should focus on connecting clients with CalFresh. However, when she analyzed the data, she found that a majority of the clients already received CalFresh. By using the Looker data, she was able to determine that an agency-wide focus on CalFresh applications wouldn't solve the problem. Most clients enrolling in our agency already receive CalFresh, and for whatever reason still need food assistance before the next disbursement. Because of the case manager's data analysis, the agency can now strategize ways to help clients with additional food assistance and resource management. In data analysis and data science, practitioners often say that all analysis begins with a question. There are a number of considerations and parameters to take into account when trying to solidify the question you want to answer with HMIS data. Let's look at an example scenario that we'll use throughout this webinar. In this example, we've identified a funding opportunity to help serve a population of clients that have not been formally recognized as a priority for your agency yet. Clients fleeing domestic violence. Your agency is not a victim service provider in that clients fleeing domestic violence do not make up the bulk of your clients. But you know you've served enough to need funding for special services for this population. Exploring your HMIS data is a great way to get information that can help bolster your grant application. Generally, you'll need to break down your question into segments of who your question concerns, what interests you about this group, and when your reporting period should be. The who part of your question here is all clients, and there's no additional demographic information to add to our exploration, such as gender, age, household composition, etc. The what part of our question is the fleeing domestic violence. The when part of our question is last year. Putting all this information together gives us a clear question to answer. How many questions fled domestic violence in our project last year? This question gives us direction for selecting the fields and parameters we'll need to use in order to answer our question. If you're able to log into HMIS and view the presentation at the same time, now's the time to do so in order to follow along. If you can't log into HMIS right now, don't worry. You'll be able to see everything in the Zoom window, but it's helpful to follow along so you'll be familiar with the interface and when we go to make your own reports. Because Looker can run really slowly when you least expect it, today's webinar will be entirely based in this presentation. I unfortunately will not be able to use Looker Live for our examples because the possibility of you sitting here watching a report load for 2 minutes is high. We've noticed that between 7:45 and 8:30 in the morning, Looker runs relatively fast. The same is true as after 5 p.m. During the day when everyone is at work, traffic seems slow for Looker. Keep this in mind when you want to try Looker for yourself and try to carve out some time in the beginning and the end of your day to practice. To get to the Explore tab, click the menu button on the top right page of HMIS, then click the Reports option. Your menu selections will look a little different from mine since my account is a system administrator account, but you'll have the Reports button there. Finally, click the Explore tab. When you click the Explore tab, you'll see a list of models like the screenshot to the right. Each model has a link that says Open next to it, which will open the Looker building report interface with the data from the model you selected. Models are sort of like buckets of data with different fields and functionality available in each bucket. Typically, you will only need the HMIS performance, client, project descriptor, and services models. We'll quickly go over each model before we get started in Looker. The HMIS performance model will meet all of the analysis needs. It requires clients to have a project enrollment during the time period you specify to appear. And since most of you do not collect data about clients without an enrollment, this shouldn't be an issue. For those times when you need to do data analysis on clients who may not have enrollments, the client model should be used. When you need data about service items provided, you'll use the services model. Finally, when you need data about your agency project setup, bed inventory, or staff, use the project descriptor model. Now let's click the open link next to the HMIS performance model. This is Looker's interface and the screen you'll use to pull data for your data analysis projects. We'll start on the left-hand side of the screen where you'll find your field pane. This pane is where you'll select fields that you want to include in your data analysis project, both in the data you want to export and how to filter the data. When you get started with Looker, you should take some time to scroll through the different segments of fields and click on the drop-down arrows to familiarize yourself with the locations of fields for easy access later. You can also search for fields using the search box or filter the field pane for only dimensions or measures using the selection boxes under the search bar. We'll cover the difference between dimensions and measures in a minute. To add a field to your report, simply click on the field in the field pane. Moving to the topmost section of the filter section, this is where you'll determine how to filter the data you want to pull. Looker automatically applies enrollments reporting period filter, which allows you to filter for clients active within whatever time period you specify. The default is the past quarter. You can adjust the drop-downs to suit your reporting period need. And make sure to keep in mind when creating date filters in Looker, you will need to add one date to the end of your reporting period. For example, if your reporting period is January 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2019, you should enter January 1st, 2020 as your end date in Looker. This is because Looker calculates the end of the reporting period using until before logic. So in our example, we're telling Looker to pull data on clients active until before January 1st, 2020, which comes out to December 31st, 2019. You can use almost any field as a filter. To do so, find the field you want to use, hover over it, and then click the filter button that appears next to it. You can also create multiple criteria for the same field using a filter. Click the plus button filter. I've added the first criteria to add another. Moving down the page, we have the visualization section. Next to that, we have the data pane. This is where you'll see the data that you've pulled before you did, excuse me. This is where you will see the data that you pull before you download it to Excel or start analyzing it here in Looker. While you scroll through the field pane, click on the field selections drop down and you'll notice each field section, there's dimensions field in gray text that appears first and measure fields in gold text that appear last. Dimensions make up the bulk of your field options. Dimensions can be thought of as an attribute or characteristic used to group data such as client age or enrollment project start date. Dimensions are almost always pulled directly from HMIS. The client's unique identifier dimension pulls the identifier number you see on the client's profile under the space under their picture. The enrollment's project start date field pulls each enrollment's project start date from the project start date field on the enrollment screen. Measures can be thought of as ways to group data from dimensions. Measures are not pulled directly from HMIS. Rather, they're a type of calculation using HMIS data. Examples of measures include count of clients and average income change. Let's go back to our example of looking for the number of clients served in the last fiscal year who fled domestic violence situations directly into the project. We've identified our who, what, and when for this question. Now we have to figure out how to pull that data from Looker. The who for our question asks, how do we identify our clients? If the raw data is to be emailed or uploaded to the cloud or otherwise shared electronically, we should use the client's unique identifier and client's personal ID. The client's unique identifier gives you the identification number you see under the client's profile picture. The client's personal ID gives you the number at the end of the URL when you're viewing the client's profile. Selecting the client's personal ID also creates a link directly to the client's profile that you can click on from Looker. The client's personal ID is useful for reports that are meant to be used for cleanup and identifying data quality issues. The what part of our question asks, what are you interested in about our group of clients? We're interested in whether clients fled violence right before entering our project. Luckily, this is a HUD data element and is easily accessible in Looker. We'll make sure to use the entry screen currently fleeing domestic violence dimension. Finally, the when for our question is, what is our reporting time period? We are interested in clients who were enrolled in the project in the last fiscal year, which is July 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2020. We're not interested in clients who are active in the project during this time, so we've set the enrollments reporting period to any time, and we will enter our date range in the project start date filter. Remember, in Looker, we have to add an extra day to the end of our reporting period, so our project start date filter will be July 1st, 2019 to July 1st, 2020. You may have noticed in the what section of our field selection, I said entry screen currently fleeing domestic violence. This is because the fields that collect the same information can appear in multiple screens. The screens are organized into sections in the Looker field pane, and these are the most common ones you'll be seeing when you start out with Looker. The fields in the client section generally pull from the profile page. The entry screen section contains head data standard elements that appear on the entry screen, and the entry custom section contains custom fields our COC is added to the entry screen, such as employment status, state you were born in, and any other fields that are specific to private funders. The update exit screen section functions the same way in that the entry screen sections in terms of where you'll find HUD data standards versus custom data, but they pull from either the status update or annual assessment screen or the exit screen. You can identify a field section by looking at the non-bold part of the field description once you've added it to the data pane. If you're following along, let's go to the Explore tab now and see if we can recreate this report. Try setting up the reporting period filters and adding the fields you see here to your data pane. As you're adding the fields to the data pane, think about other types of reports that you might find useful to export from Looker. You might be familiar with the program details report that you can access on the reports page. This report pulls all the client's data information from a certain screen for you, which can be very useful for a thorough overview of your enrollments. But maybe you don't need quite so much information. Maybe there's a subset of fields you frequently work with, whether for reporting on your agency's activities or for data quality cleanup that you can add to a custom Looker report that you can always have exactly what you need. Downloading this report and analyzing the results in Excel would be an easy way to explore your data. Now we'll briefly go over how to export your data from Excel with some basic Excel tips. To download your report, click on the gear icon in the top right corner of your Looker screen, and then click Download. When you click Download, another screen will appear with options for your download. First, you want to change the file format to Excel spreadsheet for the example we're working with now. Then this is optional, but I find a good practice to change the results option to as displayed in data tables so that your column headers match exactly what you see in the data pane. This will be especially important if you create a report that uses the same field from the entry screen and the update or exit screen. Generally, you leave the values as formatted. This means your download will be an Excel file that knows how to differentiate between a text field from a data field from a currency field. Finally, you'll want to change your limit to all results to make sure you see all of the data that has been captured by your filters. If you leave this as results in table, you'll only download the number of rows that appear in your preview, which is defaulted to 500. Now we'll briefly cover some Excel tips for analyzing your HMIS data. These tips are not unique to the reports exported from Looker, the Explore tab, or the Data Analysis tab. You can also do this with the canned report that you've downloaded as an Excel file. And just to know, all the data you'll be seeing today comes from the training site and is made up. So no client information is being shown. Actual client information is being shown. Once you open your Excel file, you can apply a filter to your report using the filters to look at your clients who fled domestic violence directly into your project. To do that, click on the filter button in your home ribbon, which may look slightly different from mine depending on which version of Excel you're using. Then click Filter from the drop-down menu that appears. After you click the filter, you'll notice drop-down arrows that appear in the header cell for each column. To filter any column, click the drop-down arrow that appears next to it. For our example, we want to see how many clients fled domestic violence immediately prior to project entry. To do that, we'll click on the drop-down arrow next to the entry screen fleeing domestic violence column, then click Select All to clear the filter selections, and click Yes to see all the clients who answered yes to this question. The result of our filtering process shows that we have 4 clients who are enrolled in the project immediately after fleeing domestic violence. Another Excel-based way to arrive at this number is to use a pivot table. To start, click the Insert tab at the top of your screen, then click Pivot Table. There are a few different ways you can organize your pivot table to show the number of clients in your report who fled domestic violence, but in this example, we've put the entry screen currently fleeing domestic violence in the row section so we can see the distribution of no's, yeses, and blanks. The values are the count of client identifiers. The Excel methods we've just gone over work best for when you need to accomplish something within a specific client's record rather than get information that doesn't deal with the individuality of clients. You may want to export our example report here if you want to identify clients who fled domestic violence into our project in order to ensure they're receiving referrals to counseling or legal services. That took a pretty long time to answer a single question. There are easier ways to answer the questions about a group of clients that is based on HUD standard data elements in Looker. Going back to the report we made earlier, you can move around to make answering our question a lot easier. This time, our reporting period filters are exactly the same. The enrollments period filter is set to any time, and the enrollments project start date is set to the fiscal year 2019-2020. Remember how we learned earlier you can use a field as a filter? In our example, we're not really concerned with the clients who are not fleeing domestic violence because we just need a count of clients who are fleeing domestic violence for our grant application. For now, we've used the number of clients measure, which you can find in the clients fields section. When the field sections are collapsed, you can see the count of how many fields are currently being used for each section. Here we have one from the clients section, which is the number of clients measure. We have 2 from the enrollment section, which are the enrollments period reporting filter and the enrollments project start date. We have 1 field from the entry screen, which is the currently fleeing domestic violence filter. Finally, you want to save your look to be able to come back to it later and not have to redo all your work. Click the Save Look button at the top of the page and name your look. The look will then be accessible in the Data Analysis tab under the System Reports. This functionality is only available to users with agency administrator access. This concludes our Looker training for how to build a basic report. I encourage you to explore Looker and experiment with creating different reports that you'll find useful for your agency. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the chat box. Or if you have specific questions for your agency, please submit a help desk ticket and we'll be sending you a wrap-up email to all of you with all the resources you can get started in Looker and a survey to let us know if this webinar was helpful or not and how to improve future webinars. So we'll give everyone a few minutes. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. And I will give us a few minutes to see if any questions come in, and then I will end our meeting. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording at this point. Thank you everyone for joining us and taking time out of your day. I do appreciate it. And if you do have any questions about Looker or any reports that you might be using, please submit a help desk ticket and we will be able to assist you.